Hi, I'm Steve G. Jones, clinical hypnotherapist, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself before we get started. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Florida, a master's degree in education from Armstrong Atlantic State University, and a doctorate in education from Georgia Southern University. I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist, a member of both the American Board of Hypnotherapy and the National Guild of Hypnotists, and I'm president of the American Alliance of Hypnotists. I'm the director of the Steve G. Jones School of Clinical Hypnotherapy. I also serve on the board of directors of the American Lung Association in Los Angeles. I have over 2 decades of experience in hypnotherapy, and I still maintain a busy practice and teaching schedule because I see clients and teach classes worldwide. My client base consists mainly of people who want to lose weight, stop smoking, or gain confidence. Other clients include sales teams interested in boosting motivation and increasing income. Also, singles looking for love, insomniacs desiring proper sleep, and actors desiring more confidence for their next audition. When I travel to see clients and teach hypnotherapy certification classes around the world, I visit such places as Tokyo, Japan, Barcelona, Spain, Paris, France, London, England, Montreal, Canada, Los Angeles, California, and New York, just to name a few. By the way, since you have an interest in hypnosis, perhaps you would be interested in becoming a certified clinical hypnotherapist. It's very easy to do. All you have to do is go to my website, betterlivingwithhypnosis.com, and click on Hypnosis Classes at the top. You can either train in person or online. After your training, you'll be added to our worldwide directory of certified clinical hypnotherapists, and you'll receive a certificate. I was fortunate for many years to have my office in Beverly Hills, California, where I worked with such wonderful people as Tom Mankiewicz, the writer of Superman, Geraldine Saunders, the writer of The Love Boat, and many other celebrities. I have been interviewed on CNN, Fox News, and appeared on True TV, in addition to having my own hypnosis TV show. With my over 20 years of experience, I'm happy to share with you techniques that I've both developed and learned, which can help you improve your life. I encourage you to visit my website, betterlivingwithhypnosis.com. There you will find my life's work, 22 books on hypnotherapy, over 3,000 hypnosis recordings available as downloadable MP3s or CDs, and these recordings will program your mind to achieve goals in such areas as weight loss, motivation, and stopping smoking. I also have audiobooks, such as this one, where I'm talking with you and sharing with you in a very dynamic way techniques that you can use to improve your life and the way you do things. The reason I'm telling you all of this is not to impress you, but to impress upon you that I, your teacher, am very capable and I know what I'm talking about. I'm also very happy for the opportunity to share this information with you, so rest assured that you're in good hands, and let's have some fun as we now expand your knowledge. I wish you well in all of your endeavors, and please be sure to visit my website, betterlivingwithhypnosis.com. Welcome to the program that is going to teach you about Tantra, also pronounced Tantra, by the way. Most people, when you ask them about Tantra, will say that it's something that has to do with sexual practices and maybe the denial of certain sexual pleasures. And maybe they know that Sting, the famous artist from The Police, has practiced Tantra, but that's about it usually. Generally, people's knowledge of Tantra ends with that. Well, I want to open your mind to the idea that Tantra actually covers a lot of ground. And rather than being just a physical experience of denial, it's much more than that. It's actually an entire system of spiritual enlightenment, which I think you're going to find very interesting. I was fortunate to have access recently to the teachings of a late Tibetan monk named Thubten Yeshe. Thubten is the first name. Yeshe is the last name, also known as Lama Yeshe. Lama is the first word. Yeshe is the second word. By the way, just as Tantra can be pronounced Tantra or Tantra, Lama Yeshe's name can be pronounced Lama Yeshe or Lama Yeshe. If you were to ask 10 Tantra instructors how to pronounce Lama Yeshe, probably half would say Lama Yeshe, and the other half would say Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe was born in Toulon, near Lhasa, in 1935, And as with many monks, from the age of 6, he attended a monastery. And it was at the monastery that he received his academic training, meaning his scholastic training, and his spiritual training. So you can think of this monastery as sort of similar to a Catholic school, except that they teach Buddhism. Unfortunately, in 1959, there was a violent takeover of Tibet by the Chinese. And so he, like many others, was forced to flee and completed his education in India at a refugee camp. And eventually he settled just outside of Nepal. During his visits to Nepal, he was able to associate with Westerners. And by 1971, Yama Leshe had founded a center which has since grown considerably in its numbers by attracting people who want to learn the teachings of Lama Yeshe. The students that Lama Yeshe attracted would later fan out around the world and establish their own centers of Buddhism. In the last 10 years of Lama Yeshe's life, he was able to travel to these centers and personally teach. In 1984, Lama Yeshe passed away in Los Angeles, California. Interestingly enough, this happened the day of the beginning of the Tibetan New Year, March 3rd, 1984. Lama Yeshe had a deep desire to spread his teachings to the West, not just of Buddhism, but a Buddhist version of Tantra. But he wanted it to be spread in a way that was easy for anyone to understand. He didn't feel that it needed to be complicated, that it needed to be something that people looked at and thought, well, maybe I won't study that because of the intricacies of it. Instead, he wanted it to be something that anyone could learn because he felt that everyone should know it. And I think that some people think that Tantra is almost a renegade version of Buddhism, and some people don't realize that Tantra is a form of Buddhism at all. But I want to tell you that among the Buddhists, Tantra is considered one of the deepest levels of Buddhist teachings. But it was actually because of this, because of Buddhists feeling that it was such a deep level and such an honored level of teaching, that Lama Yeshe had to actually go against the grain a bit to make it something that was easily understood by everyone, because the Buddhists almost had an idea of keeping it as something complex, only known by a few, revered by many, but not really understood by many. And Lama Yeshe's point of view was that this should be something that we don't put on a pedestal quite like that. Yes, it should be revered, and it should be on a pedestal, but not in that way. It should be instead accessible to everyone. Lama Yeshe did have a strong reverence for Tantra. He felt that it was similar to nuclear energy, and he felt that Westerners had been so successful in tapping into things such as nuclear energy, but they weren't looking within to the nuclear energy they had within themselves. That's how powerful he felt Tantra was. And he felt that as long as we remained unaware of the power of Tantra, that we would fall prey to all sorts of things, that our lives would lack purpose, and that we would be the victims of emotional pressure and mental pressure. So realize that Tantra actually allows us to tap into something within ourselves that is going to help us live a better life. It's going to help us overcome pressures. It's going to help us change our lives, take them from being meaningless and move them into the arena of being meaningful so that we can live fuller and richer lives. Lama Yeshe felt that Tantra could be taught in a step-by-step manner, meaning that you could take logical steps to understanding it, a lot like math, but not complicated like calculus. So he looked at it as sort of a basic math that you could learn in steps. First, you learn how to do this, then the next step builds on that step, then the third step builds on those other two steps, and so forth. And as you were progressing, rather than just learning how to do more and more math, you were actually learning more about yourself and learning how to live more in harmony with yourself and those around you. But unlike other forms of teaching and learning, Tantra has to do with direct experience, learning from doing. And so Lama Yeshe felt, correctly so, that Westerners would really resonate with this concept. And as it turns out, he was exactly right. Make no mistake, Tantra is about joy. So by studying it, you will increase the joy in your life. Just to show you how instrumental Lama Yeshe was in the world of Tantra, I want to take you back now to the winter of 1982, and this also occurred in the winter of 1983. Editing retreats were held in Italy. And the idea was to go through the teachings, the tantric teachings of Lama Yeshe, and decide which teachings should be published and which ones would be not. The idea wasn't to suppress anything, it was just to figure out which teachings would make the most sense to people. And one of the main focuses was to get everything organized, because there were a lot of teachings by Lama Yeshe, but they weren't all necessarily organized. So there were a lot of sources, a lot of different writings that he had, for example, but they weren't in any categories. So one of the main aims was to get everything into categories. Now, since Lama Yeshe didn't pass away until 1984, these writings could then be presented to him. So in April of 1983, the synthesis of Lama Yeshe's writings were presented to him, and he was able to listen to what was said and to read what was written and to offer corrections and offer more explanations and offer ideas for how the material could be improved upon. And Lama Yeshe, even in the last year of his life, was very active, still teaching in places such as California and Italy, and even those teachings were considered in the final writings of what would be the synthesis of Lama Yeshe's life work. So what I'm going to present to you is taken from Lama Yeshe's writings, the synthesis of his writings and his oral teachings, most of which has been approved by Lama Yeshe. But keep in mind that some of the lectures that he gave during the last year of his life were not checked over by him, so they are also part of this teaching. But you can rest assured that I've taken every possible step to make sure that the source is pure and that in this program you do have the actual teachings of Lama Yeshe in the way that he would have presented them. Let's talk now about Shakyamuni, the founder of Buddhism. Shakyamuni, spelled Shakyamuni, all one word, lived 2,500 years ago, and you may know him better as Buddha. He was born as an Indian prince. His name was Siddhartha at the time of his birth. This was the 6th century BC. According to the records that we have, he spent the first 29 years of his life in the palaces that his father had built. These were considered to be pleasure palaces, by the way. And as the story goes, he left his father's house and began searching for a new way of life, a way that would end all dissatisfaction and all suffering. So for the next 6 years, he denied himself, mostly physically, and this was in an attempt to gain control over his mind and body. But he discovered that his approach was a little extreme. And just as his previous life in the pleasure palace was also extreme, this extreme of denial wasn't getting him where he wanted to be. And he eventually decided on the middle path, the path between overindulgence and denying yourself completely. This middle path allowed him to reach a stage of full enlightenment and allowed him to become a Buddha. So for the next 45 years, he preached this middle way. But he had a way of teaching which was designed to pay particular attention to the type of person he was teaching. And having gone through a doctoral program in education, I can tell you that modern-day teaching is the same way. We cater to the types of learners that are out there rather than teaching just one way. Now, that's in an ideal setting. Not all education is like that in our modern world because sometimes resources can be limited. But the idea is, the ultimate idea in education is to understand the learner and to teach the information the way the learner is going to understand it best. Well, that's similar to the approach that Buddha had. He understood that different people had different temperaments. They were different types of people. They also had different aptitudes, different abilities to understand certain things. So he would cater his teaching to individual people based on their differences. In Sanskrit, Buddha's teachings are called dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A. And dharma is defined as that which holds us back from suffering and its causes. In dharma, we find thousands of different approaches for overcoming physical and mental obstacles. Now, when I say obstacles, I mean obstacles to our well-being and obstacles to our happiness, because let's face it, humans will, if given the opportunity, come up with all sorts of obstacles to their well-being and obstacles to their happiness. But Buddha fit all these teachings in two categories, Tantra and Sutra, and these are both considered to be vehicles. Vehicles in Sanskrit would be yana, Y-A-N-A. So we have Sutra yana and Tantrayana. But the one thing they have in common is that they both recognize the pure nature of the human mind. So let's talk about that pure nature. According to Buddha, no matter how deluded or confused we are, our nature, that core part of us, is pure and clear. Think of it like clouds covering the sky. The sky is essentially pure and clear, but the clouds, in our case, our anxiety, our suffering, our confusion, can block that view, but they do not alter it. Clouds go away, and the view comes back. The sun comes out once the clouds are gone. It's the same way with us, according to Buddha. Sometimes things can get a little cloudy, but that doesn't affect our true nature. Our true nature remains pure. Buddha believed that deep within us reside wisdom and love, and he also believed that the main goal of every spiritual practice, whether Buddhism or some other practice, the main goal of all spiritual practices is to get those clouds out of the way so that we can rediscover our pure nature. And it is only then, when we have gotten those clouds out of the way and rediscovered our pure nature, that we can see the pure nature in others. But in the meantime, until we get those clouds out of the way, we are going to see the faults and the impurities in others. And the reason for this, according to Buddha, is that our reality, the way we perceive our world, is just a reflection of our inner reality, what's going on within us. Have you ever heard someone, for example, make a comment about someone else, maybe mention a limitation that the other person has, and you start to think, wait a minute, the person who's talking has that limitation, whatever it may be. That part of ourselves that we despise, or that we wish wasn't there, or that we feel bad about, that's what we tend to see in others oftentimes. Part of us that we hate in others. That's an example of the cloud covering I'm talking about. If our reality is cloudy because of our own impurities, we're going to see our own impurities reflected in others, and we're going to focus on those impurities. So when we learn about the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha and other spiritual teachers, we must realize that they are no better than us. They are no worse than us. They have just managed to get those clouds out of the way so that they can tap into their purity, so that their purity can shine, and then they're able to see that purity in others and lead them along the path of enlightenment. So according to the Buddhist teachings, our goal as humans is to reach the state of Buddhahood, also referred to as enlightenment. And the good news is that this is available to everyone. Everyone can reach this state. And this happens when ignorance, hatred, greed, etc., everything that's clouding up our minds and clouding up our lives, it happens when all of that is removed, completely removed, and when our positive qualities are completely and fully developed. This then gives us unlimited skill, unlimited compassion, and unlimited wisdom. And when you stop and think for a moment about people you admire, for me that list is very short. But when you stop to think about people you admire, you may notice these qualities in those people. Now, when I say admire, I mean people I look up to and try to emulate and try to be like. That's different from respect. I respect all humans equally. But those I admire are people such as Deepak Chopra, Oprah Winfrey, Wayne Dyer. People like this seem, at least to me, to have the qualities of the Buddha. It seems to me when I watch them in action that their motives have nothing to do with greed. They're already financially okay. In fact, they're much better than okay financially. They've already got all that they want. In fact, if they were to stop now, they'd be fine for the rest of their lives just by royalties from what they've already done. I also never hear in their conversation anything about hatred, and I certainly never hear anything that sounds like ignorance. I hear words that sound like enlightenment. So to me, those three, and a few others, stand out in my mind as people I want to be like. So this idea of enlightenment, this idea of fulfilling your purpose, isn't unique to Buddhism. This is something that we can all relate to. But let's take a look now at the tantric approach to that. According to Sutrayana, path to enlightenment is all about getting rid of our faults, getting rid of our limitations, and developing our good qualities such as wisdom and love. And this is facilitated by meditation, by developing our powers of concentration, by being good people, in other words, acting in an ethical way, and other concepts along these lines. And this leads to full awakening. This leads to enlightenment. Now, because you are doing certain things and, of course, not doing certain other things, and you are causing your enlightenment to happen through your actions, this is called the causal vehicle to enlightenment. So Sutrayana is considered the causal vehicle to enlightenment. You're causing your enlightenment to happen. So this is considered to happen gradually. You're gradually causing this to happen. Now, Tantrayana, on the other hand, is a much faster approach, and that's what this program is about. Now, people who practice Tantra don't just ignore the positive qualities of Sutrayana, but practitioners of Tantra act as if they have already received this enlightenment. They act as if they are already a completely enlightened Buddha, and that, for the practitioner of Tantra, is just a starting point. So whereas Sutra teaches a gradual path toward enlightenment, Tantra teaches that you are already enlightened, and you can spring forth from there and go further. That's why I, as a hypnotherapist, really enjoy it. Because let's face it, you can go to a therapist and talk for years in what I call talk therapy, and you can get the results you want. And I have no objection to talk therapy if that's the way you want to proceed. But realize this can take anywhere from 1 to 10 or even more years. It's a very long, slow path. That's similar to Sutra. My approach as a hypnotherapist is that we can make that change quickly. In fact, Tantra goes beyond that to say that you've already made that change. Now what else do you want to do? So I really enjoy the Tantric approach. So since Tantra teaches that you already have the results of your spiritual practice, Tantra is sometimes referred to as the resultant vehicle to enlightenment. So Sutra is the causal vehicle. You're causing your enlightenment to happen gradually. Tantra is the resultant vehicle. You already have the result. You already have the enlightenment. So people who practice Tantra are not waiting for enlightenment to come. They're not waiting for a future in which they'll be all-knowing and everything will be wonderful. They embrace that right now. Now, I'm not saying that one is better than the other or one is higher than the other. They are both considered valid paths to enlightenment, just as I don't consider talk therapy to be superior to hypnotherapy or vice versa. For me, it's just personal preference. So think about the implications of this. Sutra would say that you have to practice now and become a Buddha, or you have to behave as a religious person so that heaven will be waiting for you. Tantra disagrees with that. Tantra says that heaven is right now. In fact, it goes beyond that. It says that we should be gods and goddesses right now. Now, when I first started studying Tantra, I must say that with my religious background, I had a bit of an objection. I was, after all, a preacher for the Church of Christ for 5 years. From 1990 to 1995, I was a preacher for the Church of Christ. So Tantra seemed to go against everything that I believed in, saying that we have enlightenment now, there's nothing to work for, saying that we're gods and goddesses. It sounded like blasphemy. But I want you to understand the context of the words. You are a god in the sense that you create your reality. You have the right to make certain decisions. You are responsible for what happens to you. So in that sense, we are gods and goddesses. Tantra believes that we're limited by our limiting beliefs. I like that concept a lot because I fully embrace that in hypnotherapy. In the work that I do as a hypnotherapist, I fully believe that we are limited by the beliefs that we hold. Tantra teaches that we're limited by beliefs such as women act a certain way, men act a certain way. Tantra believes we're limited by the beliefs that we are a certain way and we can do nothing about that. Tantra says that's nonsense. Tantra teaches that those limitations are just things that you have in your head that aren't real. Tantra says that that's why you have conflict within yourself, and that's why we have conflict with other people. But if we recognize that every man is already complete, and every woman is already complete, then conflict goes away. Also, if we embrace the idea that every man has male and female energy, And every woman also has male and female energy, more conflict will go away. In fact, Tantra teaches that we are all the embodiment of universal energy, and that everything we need is already within us. Isn't that a wonderful concept? All right, let's take a little break now, and I want to make sure that you're with me, that you're paying attention and that you're learning something. So what I want you to do right now is, if you're driving and you can pull over, go ahead and do that. If you're not driving, then you can definitely do this. You can take out a piece of paper and you can write down 5 things that you've learned so far from what I've said. 5 things that resonated with you. Now, I want you to keep in mind, they don't even have to be 5 things that I said. Maybe you got some good ideas from what I said. Maybe I said something and your brain took it and blew it up a million times and came up with all kinds of wonderful, amazing possibilities based on what I said. If that's the case, then feel free to write that down. I just want you to write down 5 things, whether they came from me or they're just thoughts that came in your head. 5 things that have come to you so far, either from me saying them or from you thinking them, as a result of listening to this program so far. So as I'm silent, I'm going to give you ample time now. I want you to write down 5 things, 5 thoughts that you have as a result of listening to this program so far. Do this now. Okay, do you have your 5 things? If not, go ahead and finish them up. 5 things, write them down. So I'm going to move forward now. Let's take those 5 things that you have written down, and I want you to elaborate on them. For example, if you have an insight number 1, that's I should change blank about myself, whatever it may be, I want you to elaborate on that. Whatever you've written down for point number 1, something that's come to you during listening to this program, I want you to elaborate on that now as I'm silent. Good. And now I want you to take point number 2 and elaborate on that. What was the second point that you wrote down, and how can you enhance this idea? I want you to make it real for yourself, because I want you to have, after you finish this program, something you can use. So on point number 2, elaborate on it. Consider what you wrote down as point number 2, the foundation. Now build a house on it. Go ahead and write down something now as I'm silent. Good. Now you're getting some momentum. Now for point 3. Point number 3 that you wrote down, something that came to you as you listened to this program, I want you to elaborate on point number 3 as I'm silent. Good. Now take point number 4, the 4th point that you wrote down, something that came to you while you're listening to this program. I want you to elaborate on point number 4 as I'm silent. Great. Last but not least, point number 5. Take point number 5 and elaborate on it as I'm silent. Good. So now you have something that you can take with you after this program. You have those 5 points that you elaborated on, and you can use them after this program's over. So let's continue on with the information now.